Thank you for being here today. On this first slide, I'm showing you my co-authors eating hot malasadas. I'm interested in how diversity is created and maintained. I've recently thought about this in the context of new sexual signals, of which there are many striking examples, like those shown here in this figure. So there are several possible paths to a new sexual signal. For a signal to arise, it could appear first in the signaler, like a new color morph in a male jumping spider in this example. Or it could appear first as a receiver feature. For example, the visual system could shift from black and white to color vision, or it could happen simultaneously. Plasticity may play an important role in facilitating novelty if it allows males and females to communicate before coupled signals and preferences exist in the genome. For example, using these same spiders from before, diet could affect male color morphs, and exposure to light environments could shape female perception or preferences. And plasticity that allows receivers to attend to a new signal could proliferate that new signal. Both of the spider examples from the previous slide would be examples of developmental plasticity, where the rearing environment shapes traits. There's also contextual plasticity or activational plasticity, and this is more rapid and reversible behavioral responses to the immediate surroundings. For example, guppies reared with predators perform fewer conspicuous displays. That would be developmental plasticity, but individual male guppies may also adjust their display rate based on the predators nearby during a given courting bout. That would be contextual plasticity. To explore the role of plasticity in novel signals, we need novel signals at their earliest stages. And I was lucky enough to be a part of the team that discovered purring crickets a few years ago. Male Pacific field crickets, T. oceanicus, stridulate to produce loud calls, which attract female crickets for mating. And only in Hawaii, these calls also attract an acoustically hunting deadly parasitoid fly, shown on the right. This conflicting selection pressure has led to the recent proliferation of male morphs, each producing a novel song. The main morphs that we've been studying include ancestral, silent, purring, and rattling. To hear more about rattling, check out Jay's talk on Friday. And you can see from this map that these morphs are distributed across the Hawaiian Islands. I'm showing you the 6 populations we've been studying for the past few years. But these new songs are not the behavior that I'll be talking about today. So for the past few years, my lab has been studying the substrate-borne vibrations that males produce during courtship. Here you can see a purring male courting a very uninterested female. You can clearly see his forelegs striking the substrate, which we can detect with a laser or an accelerometer. We documented low-frequency vibrations caused by wings, as well as loud broadband percussive strikes that you can see in the bottom panel. Males only drum during courtship and in no other contexts, like during calling song. And substrate-borne vibration had not been previously described in this species. And so we've been quantifying this drumming behavior using one-on-one courtship trials across those same 6 Hawaiian populations, each containing different male morphs. And you can see that we've observed drumming in all of the populations. And we just traveled to French Polynesia, which is the source of the Hawaiian populations. All of the males in French Polynesia produce ancestral song. And while rare, we did find that drumming exists in that ancestral state. But you can see that drumming has increased in frequency in the Hawaiian populations. And this increase is particularly driven by the newly evolved purring morph. Here you can see that drumming is differentially expressed across morphs. So next we asked if plasticity could be playing a role in the rise of this new drumming behavior in Hawaii. We first explored contextual plasticity. We did this by removing a male's ability to produce airborne song by cutting off one of his wings, and we only include experiments or trials where the male stridulates and wiggles his one wing. So what did we find? So here we can see in the control treatment, males can still produce airborne song. In the silenced treatment, they cannot. And we can see that purring males are not plastic. They still maintain a high likelihood of drumming. Rattling, a newly derived morph, is also not plastic, but has a much lower amount of drumming. The ancestral morph is actually very plastic. They increase their drumming when airborne sound is removed in the silenced treatment. And lastly, the very, very ancestral population from French Polynesia is the most plastic, and they actually increase their drumming to match the likelihood of both ancestral and purring morphs. So note that we've lost plasticity in the two most recently evolved morphs. Purring also has the quietest airborne song and the most drumming. And you can see there's a significant gene by environment interaction, which theory says is important for creating and maintaining diversity. So we're excited to explore in the future if this plasticity is driven by male feedback or by female behavior during courtship. Next, we explored developmental plasticity. So we used 100% purring population, and we began by manipulating the acoustic environment, since others have shown that songs heard during development affect behavior for ancestral and silent T. oceanicus. So we simply exposed males and females to either purring or ancestral song during development. In our preliminary data, we found that the acoustic environment did not affect whether males drummed or how long until they began drumming. The treatment did have some effects. For example, males invested more in their testes if they heard ancestral song, anticipating perhaps a more competitive mating environment, and this aligns with a previous study in ancestral Australian T. oceanicus, this finding. The treatment also had some effects on females. For example, females reared with ancestral song were much less likely to mate, and they were 5 times more likely to be aggressive during courtship than the females reared with purring song. So for this acoustic treatment, some traits were affected in both sexes, but drumming appears not to be developmentally plastic. So to wrap up, drumming is a newly discovered courtship behavior that's more common in Hawaii than the ancestral source population. It's also more common in recently evolved morphs, and it's contextually plastic depending on the morph, so gene by environment interaction, but it's not developmentally plastic. So are we in the early stages of a new signal? The next step is to explore receiver behavior to find out. But for now, we can say that contextual plasticity is likely important in the rise of drumming in Hawaii.